This spring break, choose your own Disney adventure with our very own Travel Bug Girls Disney Expert. A 3-day Disney park experience including resort accommodations and Disney dining. Cassie specializes in crafting custom vacations full of joy, ease, and just the right amount of Mickey-shaped snacks. She takes the stress out of planning, adds a dash of enchantment, and turns every trip into a storybook adventure. Visit travelbuggirls.com or click the link in our show notes to find out how Travel Bug Girls can make your Disney dreams come true. Welcome to the Travel Bug Girls podcast, the show where we dive into the world of travel, exploring everything from expert tips and insider secrets to unforgettable destinations and the latest trends. Whether you're a seasoned globetrotter or planning your very first adventure, we've got you covered with the advice and inspiration you need to make your travels truly unforgettable. So sit back, relax, and let's take your travel planning to the next level.
Bed and breakfast and like Airbnbs, guest houses. Let's talk about that specifically when traveling internationally. Let's talk about those as options.
Sometimes they can be some of my favorite options, especially like in the UK. What a great opportunity to experience the culture when you're staying in someone's home, and often they're several hundred years old in the city center or in the countryside. I mean, you can be in some really unique spaces that way. You often get to meet people that run a small inn or a bed and breakfast tend to be the kind of people who like people. Mm-hmm. So they're excited to be meeting you and taking care of you and introducing you to the culture that they live in. They know that they know all the best secrets, and they're often going to feed you a traditional breakfast. They're going to sit often at the table with you and tell stories or answer questions. If you're like, hey, we want to go somewhere special for lunch, they're definitely going to recommend someone, and often in a very personal way. Like, yes, go down to this restaurant and ask for Betty, right? So they're going to, that's not always the case, but that has been 100% my experience so far. I think it's more likely to be the case because if they don't enjoy that experience, they're not going to stay in that position very long. So they tend to be people who really enjoy meeting new people. They know they're meeting tourists and people from other countries often, and they're excited about helping you to experience it in a really personal way. So I think it can be a really special experience. Now, with all that said, it is a shared experience often. Even though you might have a private bedroom, like in the case of a bed and breakfast or a small inn, you still are going to probably sit at a table with other people for breakfast, or at least very near other people. It does tend to be more personal. You're very aware that someone next door might be able to hear you because it's more of a house setting than a hotel setting with extra padding in the walls in a hotel today. Imagine sleeping in your house and somebody you don't know is in the room next door. That's more what it's like. But you have that personal experience of getting to know the local culture in a new way. So I really enjoy that experience myself. And I really see a lot of women, especially where, I don't know why, but particularly in the UK and in Ireland, we have a lot of people request that kind of thing. They're looking for that experience, that real person who really lives there, who's really going to tell them the best thing to do during the day, who's going to feed them a handmade scone for breakfast with hot Irish tea, right? Like they want to have the experience of pretending you live there. And that is when I think you're going to be the happiest with that kind of selection.
If you want that kind of experience, how do you find that?
There's two main ways I would recommend if you're not working with a travel agent, okay? First would be if you want a bed and breakfast experience, I would Google it. I would straight up search it, bed and breakfast, and then put in your location, because you're going to get websites that have used that wording in their description. So someone who self-identifies as a bed and breakfast. So you probably also want to scroll past the first couple of options that show up, because now we know all all the ads are going to show up at the top. It's going to show you a hotel chain. It's going to show you a hostel, maybe. It may not show you an actual bed and breakfast, but look for someone that has a website that they're claiming is the bed and breakfast. And then read their description, but then also try to find some reviews, some customer testimonies of what that experience was. Another place you might find that is in your search, you might come across some travel blogs where people have written about their experience in specific bed and breakfast in that area. And that, I think, is a much higher level than a review, where someone is telling you the story of their experience and what they enjoyed about it. So that's going to be an even better recommendation. Another option, though, if you're looking for a website that's going to give you multiple options, I think right now probably the best place for that is Expedia. Expedia is listing more and more options that are kind of outside the box, and they're making it easier for people that have personal property where they're welcoming people in to pay a fee to be listed on Expedia. So now we're seeing VRBO sites listed there. We're seeing these small inns and bed and breakfast. And so you're going to be more likely to find something. It's even a category in their filter now, bed and breakfast. So if there's any available in a region, you can select that filter and it will give you those options at the top of the suggestion list. So that would be my second recommendation. But once again, read those reviews and remember that photos can be deceiving. So make sure you really know what you're getting into in all of these cases.
I know that when we were at our conference, I met with a couple suppliers that do have access to, bed and breakfasts and villas, which is we haven't really talked about, but villas that may or may not include, butler service or whatever if you're going internationally. But so your travel agent has access to those different places too. And I don't know if Kara has somebody specifically that she works with, but I did remember talking to a specific supplier and I was like, I didn't know that you had that.
And a lot of the tour operators now are using those, especially in the UK. We see that a lot. CIE is a very popular company, and they sometimes are using small inns or bed and breakfast for their small group travel. And I think it's a really easy way to make your experience in that location a little more personal.
Yeah.
And authentic.
Yeah, they're like the owners of bed and breakfasts and villas and all this area that we're talking about. They're invested, this is it's like a small business. They don't have the corporate money and overhead, and therefore it's less sterile, but they also it's not on the level of hostels where that's a whole different ball game, in the opposite direction. I wouldn't say sterile, but it's the same idea where it's like it's not somebody's home, it's not somebody's
it's impersonal.
Yeah. Personal, whereas these people are invested in their space. And the like Heather was kind of saying, the catch-22 of that is that they also, since they don't have that corporate budget, they're harder to find because they're not plastered on site
Let's talk about, as we get ready to finish up, agriturismos. I know we've talked about this. Oh my
gosh, love that.
Yeah, we've talked about this in some of our past podcasts as far as getting like the most experience out of your stay. So like, what is that? Let's just start there. What is that?
I love really unusual places to stay and historic. Those are the two. Like a historic hotel, oh my gosh, wins my heart every time. But in Italy and agriturismo, although these are available in other places in Europe in particular, I think we're even seeing more of that in Greece now, where people are converting their traditional farm homes into an inn or bed and breakfast. In Italy, they call it an agriturismo if it's still a functioning farm. And it's a really special experience, and they do vary, like all these other things, in how many amenities come with it. It can be pretty rustic. It could be literally, this is the farm family and they had 2 extra buildings and they converted the old barns or the old houses into an inn, basically, with hotel rooms. But they're getting on the tractor in the morning and they're going to work, and so you have like an hour to get breakfast and then they're out of here. So sometimes it can be really rustic, but then there are other extremes of this where it feels almost like a resort in the middle of the countryside where they have, a beautiful swimming pool and a cocktail hour with wine that they grew right there in the fields, and, a luxury dinner at their restaurant right there on the property. And the reason these are easy to find in that area, I think, is because the way farming was done for centuries was multiple families living in one location and working together day in and day out means you have multiple buildings, because you have a home for each of these family members, or a massive home that can hold multiple generations of families. Usually, though, multiple buildings and all the farming buildings. So they have a lot of things to work with. And now with modern farming practices, they have a lot of empty buildings and they have a lot of space, and they want people to come out to them from the big cities and experience, this and take advantage of what they have to offer. And so it makes it easy to set these up. So there's more and more of these that we're seeing pop up, and they can be really special experiences. What we haven't seen traditionally in the past is Americans taking slow vacation in Europe. Traditionally, Americans experiencing Europe is go, 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 see, do, do, do. It's very, very busy. You're trying to see everything all at once in a very short amount of time. It's an exhausting kind of travel because it's all about hitting that list. And what these are allowing you to do is slow down and experience the local culture in a whole different way. You're getting outside of the city. You're meeting real people. These are real families running these that have been often on the land for generations, and they have some stories to tell, and they have real things to share with you. And our family got to experience it a couple years ago. I took my grandmother and aunt and mother into the Tuscan countryside, and we stayed in the agriturismo. It was beautiful. It was an incredible experience, and I have since sent multiple clients to different ones at different levels. My mom just went with all of her best friends to one that was kind of a couple levels up, where they had their own restaurant and wine tasting every afternoon and a beautiful pool, and they all had like apartment style rooms so they could sit and lounge and sit on the couch and talk for hours and drink wine. And so these kinds of experiences are a very different kind of vacation now in Europe. And like I said, we're seeing them pop up across the European countryside. So that is becoming more and more popular. Whereas people used to ask for a villa experience, and this is similar, where you are staying in a historic home and getting to see that architecture and that lifestyle in a different way than if you're staying in a city hotel. So it's a really neat way. And also another kind of adjacent version of that would be people asking to stay in a castle. There are a lot of really incredibly unique historic buildings that have been converted into some version of an inn, a bed and breakfast, a small hotel, so that they can take advantage of their unique building structure and their unique location and try to find a way to maintain it, honestly. And so imagine, Downton Abbey. If you're a Downton Abbey fan, the house has to maintain itself somehow. How are we going to keep the roof from leaking? And eventually a lot of these families, what they've done is they've converted their beautiful historic building into some version of a hotel. So these are now more and more and more available across Europe. But it does take some clever digging to find access to them sometimes. And that's where travel agent really can help. So something to know. And Tina mentioned that some of them come with some extra perks, but don't feel like they all have to be luxury. Like the agriturismo example, that was actually the most affordable for us in the region when we stayed the first time. Whereas, a villa of, the company Villas of Distinction is one that comes to mind. Those can be very high-end luxury with like a private chef or, some other amenities that come with that. And you're paying a much different price. You maybe are renting the entire place. So that could be really fun if you're having a 50th anniversary or a birthday party and you want to take all of your closest friends and family for this luxury vacation. Once you divide it out, maybe it's more affordable when you take an entire group with you, but to go by yourselves could be a very expensive situation. So, there's a huge variety of options when you want to stay in a unique setting.
Although if you do want to experience that by yourself, It's borderline a different topic, so I won't get too much into it. But there are ways to live and work on a farm in exchange for stay, if that's something you want to experience, but don't really have the budget to do it or don't have people to go to make that more cost effective. There are some really really cool, really great opportunities that all over the world where you can work on a farm like this. You can learn, things about farming or herbalism, or and it's not just farming. Even there are other jobs that can be done, even just like upkeeping well, they're not necessarily hotels, but like upkeeping the building itself is it's obviously more of an investment time wise and lifestyle wise. But if you're looking for something different and want to experience that, there are short term, there are long term. It's all doable. Yeah.
I know that there's a cat sanctuary in Greece that allows you to, if you stay for at least a month and help out with the cats for like 4 hours a day. You can stay.
Perfect. That's great. What work?
There's also some really unique stays on sites like VRBO.
Mm-hmm.
We stayed in Scotland in a converted train station, and that was a very unique experience way out in the countryside, and it was beautiful, but the train was no longer running as often, and the town was trying to figure out, like, what do we do with our train station? We don't want to lose it. And so they converted it into like an Airbnb that you could rent out, and the town was maintaining it and benefiting from the profit, I guess. So it was a way that they were able to keep that station, and it was a really neat experience. So there's a lot of things like that. I've heard of lighthouses and houseboats and all kinds of really neat, unique stays. So that's something too that, outside of a villa, maybe you might want to try some other unique ways of staying in a new location.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, I thought it would be fun to share our most unique accommodation experiences. Everybody want to share? Which I know probably some of y'all have kind of talked about it as in this discussion, but
I already said two. Sorry.
I'll share my two while y'all think about. So my first experience was a bad one. We were going to visit my grandma in a nursing home in the middle of nowhere. Long story, but there was literally two motels in the whole tiny town, and there was also some kind of event, like a baseball thing or something going on that weekend, so we just had zero options, and we stayed in this motel that was, oh my gosh, it was so disgusting that we went to Walmart and bought cleaning supplies and cleaned the whole bathroom and the room before we even stayed in. We had two little kids then, and there were bugs. It was so bad. I don't know how we didn't come home with bed bugs or something. Ooh, fleas or who knows what. It was so bad. Anyway, so not ideal. My second one was more unique. This was on an island that I went to, and this particular island where we were staying did not have its own source of fresh water. So their only fresh water on the island was whatever rainfall they had. So everything in that hotel was you had to be really careful with the water, conserve water, and everything was made to conserve water. But one time when I stayed there, they had a huge I guess basin, water storage area underneath the hotel. And so one time the room we stayed in, when it would rain, you could hear the water going into the basin under the floor.
Oh, wow.
And it was cool, but it was really when you're sleeping at night and it sounds like you're sleeping over a giant cavern that's flowing water in it. It was a very It was a very odd experience and kind of made it hard to sleep because I'm hearing it and my brain is feeling like I'm floating over a giant dark cavern. Anyway, so that was a unique experience because of the water situation there on that island, that all the places had to have some sort of storage area for fresh water. So, and then if you run out of fresh water, you just run out of fresh water. So that was a unique experience. Anyway, go ahead.
I have two unique experiences that I was thinking of. I did a wine tour with a sommelier in California, And so it was an all-inclusive thing, and he brought us to all these places. And we stayed at in a riverboat. In the heart of Old Sacramento. I had to Google it really quick to remember what it was. And that was a really interesting place to stay because the room was so small. It was my friend Sherry and I, and you could stand in the room and put your arms out, and I mean, the room was about as wide as, and, you know, we had to sleep in the little bed together, and the bathroom was just itty bitty, you know, because this was a working paddle wheel riverboat, you know, but they had a restaurant there that was amazing. So that was an interesting experience, staying on that itty bitty little boat. And then the other one that I was just thinking of, and it's leaving my mind, was really cool, was in Costa Rica. We stayed at a resort, and they had different options, and my husband decided to upgrade us into like this house on stilts. So it was just one room, but it was up above the trees, and it was simply amazing. We had a wraparound deck. There was an outside like kitchen, but we had to keep everything really closed because the monkeys and everything would go in and just tear your stuff up. But it was a really, really interesting, unique experience because we were above the trees and we could just sit on the patio and watch. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful space. And it had an outdoor shower and an outdoor bath, as well as an indoor. But if you wanted to take your shower outside, you could do that. And it was just beautiful. Want to go back.
Wow. I've done it all. I've stayed in castles and villas and hostel in Nice, which I did not enjoy. I've stayed in a train station. I've stayed everywhere, I feel like. But I will share two unique ones. One, our very first all-inclusive, we got upgraded when we arrived because the resort was kind of almost empty. And so we got to stay in this beautiful suite, I guess. And it was on an island in Mexico. So it was like right between the Caribbean, like one side of the island was facing the Caribbean and one side was facing the ocean. And so it was just amazing. We enjoyed it. And we were on a little island off the coast of Mexico. So we rented a golf cart one day and drove around and you could drive around the entire island in one day. And that was so fun. It was a really neat experience. So I've always wanted to go back there, and I've heard they've redone all the resorts on that island and now it's really popular. So I'm sure it wouldn't be at all the same experience if I went back. But another unique experience I had was my daughter and I went to Australia and New Zealand, and part of our trip we stayed in a bed and breakfast, which was literally a house in a neighborhood. Like it didn't seem like a business. If you were just driving by, it was just another house in the neighborhood. You wouldn't have known that's what it was. But we had a room at the back of the house, but there were 4 other rooms that different people were staying in. And in the morning we went and sat at the table in the kitchen and had breakfast with the random people. And it was a great way though to feel safe and comfortable. And we could ask opinions about like what should we go see and do today. And so, you know, I don't know, that was a really different experience than I was expecting when we got there, but it made it so that we could stay. We were there like 10 days. So
Join us
really
next
nice,
week for part 2 of our podcast on international travel
One
accommodations.
place I visited was last year. I was in Stockholm with a friend, and we stayed in a boat, but it wasn't a houseboat. It was like a large ship. It was a historic ship, and it had been turned into this hotel essentially, and it had like a dining area and a breakfast area and a whole bunch of rooms, and it was quite an experience. The room we stayed in, it was bunk beds, and it was kind of weird, you know, because it's slightly moving the whole time, so your brain has to adjust to this room that you're used to being still is moving. But it was a really cool experience. It was located in a place that was near things we wanted to do. The Stockholm trip was kind of spontaneous, so we had low standards. We were low maintenance for that trip. So yeah, but it was really cool. It was very cool. And the way they had redone it was really nice. So we enjoyed it. It was also the end of a long trip, so we were very tired, but it was really sweet. Another one was in Costa Rica. and I was driving this little rental car, a sedan, which if you've driven in Costa Rica, you know, is a toss-up whether it's going to be a good idea to have a sedan or not. And I'd never rented a car before, so I was stressed out about it. And it was an Airbnb, and they had assured me that the road was fine for a 2-wheel drive sedan. But it had been raining, and we arrived at night, and it was the longest dirt road, with lots of potholes and like rocks flying. What was really cool about it though was you had to go through this like palm tree forest to get there, and then, you know, around the mountain essentially. And it just so happened that the little house, this like a tiny house that we were staying in, was at the very end of the drivable road. So we just parked in the middle of the road as they told us to, because past that point of the road, you only go by on dirt bike, horse, or foot. So we stopped there, and you walk down to the little house, and it was on the side of the mountain, so it just overlooked all this really lush green. It was a beautiful view. It was kind of funny. It was like a juxtaposition because the tiny house itself wasn't great, but the view was amazing and beautiful. And there were cows, like Costa Rica cows. I can't remember what breed of cows they were. We looked it up at the time. This trip was with my fiance, also last year actually. And every time we go outside, there's like a cow by the car. They're just wandering around. The cows, very cute, friendly cows. Yeah, lots of lush, lots of wildlife. And you really felt kind of out there. Yeah, those two are the ones that stick out to me.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank y'all for joining us today and for this chat about all the different kinds of international accommodations. It really does kind of run the gamut from the most basic possible to the most luxurious possible.
Yeah.
So really cool. And I love some of the ideas of like unique places to stay. I feel like that really kind of gives you a deeper experience into the culture and all when you can take advantage of that. Yeah. So I hope that our listeners have kind of heard some new ideas and maybe some new options on where they want to stay next time they travel. So thank you guys so much for sharing with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Travel Bug Girls podcast. Be sure to subscribe to get our new episodes every week. We'd love to connect with you on social media. Share your answer to this week's podcast question with us at facebook.com/travelbuggirls. You can find us on your favorite social media by using @travelbuggirls. Want to join our VIP group? You'll find us on Facebook groups under TBG Travel Bugs. Learn more about the Travel Bug Girls and what we do on our website at travelbuggirls.com. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and safe travels.